Good. Welcome, everyone. My name is Bart van Zevenand. I'm the Chief Product and Technology Officer at RightCrowd, and I'm here with Lee Odess, very well known in our industry. Welcome, Lee. Lee from the Access Control Collective. Welcome, and happy to have you here on the phone with us, Lee.
Thank you, Bart. It's great to be here, and I appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah. Super. We're going to have a very interesting sort of chat here about a number of topics. You've all seen sort of the title. So the important thing that we're going to dive into is in this space of physical access control, is it going to be hardware? Is it going to be software? Where is this industry going? Who's going to be the winner? So that's what we're going to work towards. But before we dive into that specific question, it's probably good, Lee, to take a step back and have a quick summary of where the physical access control industry comes from, where it started, and up until roughly where we are. And then from there, we'll take it to into the main topic of today's session.
Yeah, absolutely. I jokingly always say that the beginning of the physical access control space was back when people were rolling boulders in front of caves. But if we were to fast forward from that to, let's call it electronic access control, is typically what majority of the time I talk about, at least, and I'm pretty sure, Bart, that's what you're inferring to as well. So if we look at the origins of the electronic access control industry, we actually went back and looked, try to find where it came from. And the earliest that we can get to is in 1973 by a company called TRW. And they did a check verification system that had a central database to where you bring a check to go buy something at a retail store. They'd run it through the machine. They punch it in. It comes back and says, yeah, you can let them pay with the check. Well, one of the machines had a relay on the back. And somebody said, hey, can you attach this to a door also? And TRW did. And what you had there at that point, if you think about it, it was really a multi-factor access control system that was tied tightly to a central database for a person and high levels of assurance that it was them to let them go through. Go a little bit further to 1983, they spun that out into a company called Basics. And that was really the beginnings of where our industry shifted back to being about the door. You saw more controllers, you saw readers. They started to run through a channel because it was licensed, like all of these things. And that is sort of from 1983 to what I say is 2020. You've had sort of iterations off of the 1973 to 2020. It's been incremental, advancements in that. Really high security marketplace, heavily focused on the hardware that's there. Software always as a feature of that hardware. Very, again, channel driven, like we said. And the real value proposition was let's keep bad people out and lock and unlock the door. That was the main value creation story that our industry has been having to do since the 70s. And frankly, we've done a really, really good job of it. Now, things have tweaked along the ways based off of typically tragic events like 9/11 or Lockerbie have triggered things like, the utilization of identity when you go through visitor management. So like permeations of the same value proposition, just I would say hardened more. And we would use the same products, for airports would be used for commercial real estate, which were used for local convenience stores. It didn't matter. You just used less of it. And it's also been very regionalized. There's only been a handful of really global players but you'd have, you go across the world and you have companies like this everywhere at this point.
Yeah, good. Thanks for that background, Lee. And maybe a follow-up question to that. Like for a long time, this industry has been, as you mentioned, have been these vendors, and these vendors try to create sort of a stack to solve physical access control, and they try to control that end-to-end stack from like the little piece of software, which to your point was more like in support of, and then you had the panels, the sort of the door itself, and the door readers and things like that, the cards. Over the last couple of years, we've seen a bit of a shift away from that, with certain companies trying, like a Mercury as an example, to say like, hey, we're going to create a panel that can work with multiple access control systems and the like. So it's sort of slowly moving in the direction of more of a best of breed or best of suite, whatever you want to refer to it. How do you see this market evolving?
Yeah. So there is the expectations of the systems and how they were designed, how they were specified, how they were installed. You basically picked your brand and you went with it, just like you said. So I'm not 100% sure if people were purposely trying to give sort of, siloed system. I just think it's the way we built. There wasn't a lot of standards. There were a lot of them were regionalized. Even like say in North America, you had some people that were good on the East Coast, some were good on the West Coast. So like I would like to believe there was a larger plan and strategy in place, but I just think it's how things have evolved. Now that said, as it's become a more sophisticated industry, more larger industry as a whole, strategies did come into play, and they looked a lot like the alarm side, because I believe the structure was like an annuity business. If you got the panels and the hardware in, you got them for life. And that life was, if they ever added onto the system, you would get the additional room or door that they did, or you had a reoccurring service upgrades in the service plan that you had. There wasn't really occurring revenue the way that it is today, but it was more of licenses and things like that for patches, because they used a window based system, whatever it might be. So there was a bit of the lock-in that happened at that point. And then, yes, you have hardware manufacturers like a Mercury that have come around and said, hey, you don't need to necessarily build your own hardware. We will for you. And then also this will be, open in a way that is more of like whoever's integrated to it, the customer does have the opportunity to shift between software providers if they wanted to. Not sure how much it happens. But it gives trust and comfort that they can do that. And then you saw locks get involved when electronic locks come through. Readers, you do have some that are OEM, but like with their own white label, but most of them are OEM throughout. So it's just an evolution to currently now. What I would call the modern electronic access control expectations of what an enterprise system would think and look like looks more like what you see from the IT side, where there are standards that are used. There's the expectations of being able to not be locked in, have best of breed, and have the flexibility to choose the system that you want. I don't think it means that we will only see those types of systems. They're, just like in audio and phones and the rest of it, there are proprietary systems. I think customers who are going to have more choice on what they want. But it's it's starting to evolve now. Frankly, we're in the midst of it, which is why it's so exciting to be part of the industry.
Yeah, good. Thanks for that. And that's a good lead into then to the main topic of this session, which is hardware versus software. Historically, this clearly, and you explained that it was hardware driven. It was born out of hardware, and hardware was always the main thing. And my background, I came out of the cybersecurity side, and in 2015, I literally got to learn the physical security side. And I still remember the very first meeting where we were talking revenues with a vendor. I'm not going to name them, but one of the large physical access control vendors. We're in this meeting, and I just like by chance sort of asked a question about like, oh, and by the way, how do you charge for the physical access control system software? And the response I got was like stunning. It's like, oh, it's $3,000 a year, and that was for a very, very large enterprise. And I thought I misunderstood. I said, "But is it like 300K? No, $3,000." And I was sitting there like, unbelievable. And of course, the whole idea was no, the model was based on hardware. That seems to be shifting. Do you agree with that? And how fast is this shift happening in the market?
Yeah, it's shifting, but more, and I would say it's just the conversations are shifting more than anything else. So for as you go through a phase change, sort of like how water turns the ice, there's that weird period in the middle where it's slush. And depending on if you're in the software side, on the call it the ice side, you look over and it looks like ice, and you're already there, and like it's shifting, and it's you can see it. But there's a large portion of people that are still water that are looking over and saying it hasn't happened yet. The reality is that the we're in the midst of that evolution and that transformation that's happening, and because of that, there's great examples everywhere of both truths existing. I think what's happened more than anything else is the open the openness, if you would, to these systems more than have historically been there. End users discovering them and the expectations changing, more influx of new players into the marketplace, and frankly, building with the architectures evolved to where like cloud and SaaS and things like that, they're not features, they're just how you build. And then the end users, I think, forcing a lot of the legacy players to have a roadmap to support what they want. So they start to introduce the cloud now more as like a feature of the legacy side, but still they're doing something. Then you had manufacturers like that whether they're public ones and there's an expectation that they start to have reoccurring revenue, or they're private ones and they start to understand net present value on reoccurring models versus project based. So they start to introduce products that, so now because they have them and they've invested in them, they're now selling them. You put all of that together and it puts us in an environment currently now where the market is shifting. So the openness to these systems is also shifting. And you have two camps. You have those that are frustrated that it isn't going fast enough, and you have the other ones that are, either sometimes self-fulfilling, a see we're an industry that goes slow or resisting. But probably where the world is like everything else, is somewhere in the middle where it's exactly where it should be. But the cottage industry of high security of yesterday is soon going to be dwarfed by the mainstream market of what looks more like an enterprise software industry, and it's going to be much greater. One is a $10 billion market. The other one is a $70 billion market. I personally spend most of my time in the 70 billion on that end of where it's going, but I've spent plenty of time in the 10. And I think we as an industry can have, conflicting thoughts in our head at the same time and say that both will exist for quite a while. It's just going to come down to what do you want and where do you want to spend your time and what do you value?
Yeah, thanks for that. And then follow-up question, when we then zoom in on the software side, so historically the software component was relatively limited, and in physical access control specifically, it was the physical access control system in which you had like an interface to enter the employees, their access rights, and things like that. That space has started to grow. There's different sort of software categories. Are there particular sort of software categories that you think are more in demand or more need for from a client perspective?
Yeah, I think so. A couple things on that. I think the what you were describing is the utility of our industry, like the adding of people, deleting of people, the giving permission, your policies, things like that. The high security side, that's the utility. It's actually, frankly, the value, in my opinion, that is the core value, because I don't care how good other things are, like a tenant engagement application in commercial real estate. If the lattes are great, that's fine, but if I don't feel safe and I'm not safe, I'm not going to go in the building. So there's this basic utility that we still need to have.
Yeah,
Then it gets interesting beyond that. And I think what's making it interesting and the ability for us to serve the market better is this verticalization that's happening and this expectation of just how software works, where if I'm a commercial real estate, I need things like the word tenant inside of the application. I'll use something
yeah,
basic. Historically, you had user, like and if you wanted tenant, it was like a custom fork that you had to go build out to go do that. It was kind of ridiculous. Now there's an expectation that certain verticals are being fed the products that go deep into those and have, whether it's the functionality and the nomenclature, like talk about the integrations that are there, the feature sets, whatever it might be. They are speaking to those verticals, and those verticals are like hospitality, multifamily residential. You've got enterprise. You've got some interesting things happening in K through 12, especially college, university. That one's accelerating. But then even like niches like logistics. So the ability to understand when I buy vaccinations in Germany and have them shipped to North America, I want to make sure that the controls were there properly. There's sensors, like the temperature, who unlocked it, who didn't, like source of record, all of that stuff, right? Like that's a huge market. I'm even seeing lockout, tag out type things for like a big market I'd never thought, historically is like industrial and mining, and now, but which is still there, but now even
yeah.
in like ski chalets and things like that, making sure that the power at the top of the mountain is off when they do service down at the bottom. That's like a big market now. Where that's why I challenge that $10 billion market size that we have, is that I keep finding $1 billion, $300 million markets all over the world, and I'm not very good at math, but when I put them together, they're much greater than 10 billion. Are they 70 billion like I say the TAM is, which is different than the market? I get that.
Yeah.
It may not be 70, but I can tell you it's north of 10.
Yeah. Good. What I want to do next is maybe zoom into one of the categories, and being a bit selfish, Right Crowd is
Sure.
active in a particular
Hey,
subset of
it's
that
your
software
LinkedIn
market.
Live. We're allowed to be selfish, so that's fine. Go
Yeah.
ahead. Yeah.
So let's dive into that space. And so Rycraft, for those who are not familiar with what we do, we're in the space of what is known in the market to some extent, and we'll about that in a bit more detail as PIM or Physical Identity and Access Management. But rather than focusing on the name itself, let's for a second talk about like what it is and why sort of it matters, and then I'll follow up with a couple of questions for you, Lee, if I may.
Yeah.
So first, starting about like what PIN is, and my background, I mentioned that I come from the logical security side. In logical security side, we if we go back in time, I'll do a little bit of a history there as
Yeah,
well.
please.
In the 80s and 90s, um, the identity and access management of IT applications was done in a very different way than what we know today. When you build an IT application, you also, as a developer, build in the identity and access management component. You literally had kept users and access rights to that application, etc. And that was the normal way of doing stuff. And then in the early 2000s, in the cybersecurity space, you had the creation of the first identity and access management companies, and they came to market with a very simple premise like, why are you trying to do that over and over and over again in each individual application? Pull that out, that functionality, put it into a platform that sits on top of your IT applications, let that layer handle all of the identities, synchronize it also upstream with systems like HR and the like, and then manage the access in there and push it down into the IT applications. Very simple, straightforward value proposition. It did take about a decade for that market to really become meaningful. It was not that easy for them, the initial vendors, to break through, but it happened. And so if we now move to the physical security space, that's what the so-called PIM space does. It's exactly the same idea. Rather than trying having a standalone physical access control system and try to do everything within that, the PIM market is sort of challenging that. And to be very clear, not challenging for every single company in the world. If you're an SMB, you're totally fine with a physical access control system. But the sort of value proposition that we pitch is very simple. If you're a large enterprise, you have hundreds of people that start each day. You have people that move locations. You have people that change roles, all of that. So keeping the access, managing the access of those people in an individual physical access control system is simply very challenging because they were designed to almost statically pre-program or configure the access. So that's where that similar idea is like, let's put an intelligent platform on top of it. That platform is really an integration platform. It integrates with all sorts of IT and business systems. I mentioned HR, but think of a learning management system where we keep track of trainings that people hold, certifications that they hold, when they expire, etc. And then you really in the middle, in that middle layer, you pull all of that information in, and then in a dynamic way, you're going to set and revoke access based on policies, based on workflows, and then push it down into those layers. Now, that's in a nutshell the space we're in. Question I have for you, Lee, is like this industry that we're part of exists for about 20 years now. But I think if you would do a survey and ask 100 large enterprises, what do you know about PIM? What do you think about PIM, etc., that we would probably be surprised about the response. So what's your take on this market that we're in?
Yeah, I mean, I think a couple things, and I'll even comment on some of the stuff you said, which is a great background, and I learned a lot from it myself. So you articulated that really nicely. Is I think we're seeing sort of a reimagination of the expectations of how our systems work, and and frankly, we're seeing this expectation that the access control industry looks like an enterprise software industry where you do have things like automation and syncing and plugging in and like all the things that you would expect of a like an SLA, like even like those things didn't exist, or the ability to understand data, and instead of doing these big data extractions that we used to do where we would charge a lot of money for them, it's sort of like the expectation in the enterprise software world is like, that's my data. I want to be able to see it and do whatever I want with it, bring it, whatever. Right. So like we're seeing that. So because to your comment of like, for large enterprise, they could just have access control. My answer to that would be is no, I actually think in the SMB as well, they're having expectations of how systems function. It may look a little bit different. It may even look more like a consumer alarm system in a lot of ways that gets up into it. But
Yeah.
they're going to want to have I don't know, I'm probably, integrations into like say QuickBooks versus whatever an enterprise would use at the large scale, right? Like, so like it's just a different expectation set, in my opinion, of how they would work, or it's done by vertical, right? Like an SMB at the retail may want to be more focused on loss and prevention and user experience. So instead of people having to, hit the button to call them over because the razors are locked inside the cabinet, they're utilizing mobile with loyalty cards to be able to tap and do it and pay and then leave, right? Like there's just different expectations. Now, I think ultimately the to your question of whether they understand it, no, I don't think they understand PIM just like they don't understand NFC, right? But what they understand is the value it creates and the problems that it solves, and they're probably looking for things like, I don't want to manage 18 different databases, so like a source of record, right? Like they want systems to be able to sync together. Like they'll say things like that, which are all indicators of like, you need a PIM, like, so then when they get to the IT person and they're like, hey, so my HR compliance, whatever, I'm getting all these requests that are coming in, they say I need a PIM because they understand it. Just like when I go take my car to get oil changed, I'm not like, I need a 95 or 652 oil thingy. No, I'm like, I need an oil change. And why? Because a light went on, not because like I even knew like I needed to do it. Like that, I think that's what we're moving to, is solution-based selling. We're applying product properly to solve problems that they have, and we have tools. Frankly, I'm one of them, and I will say it. We're like a bunch of nerds in our own domain that get excited about terms like PIM. Like, you know what I mean? Like we do. And then we're now getting to the point where the marketplace is starting to, and this is why I'm excited about access control. I talk about this stuff all the time. I'm excited about it because the market actually finally, I think my mom knows what I do now, right? Like there's enough interest in the world for what we're doing that we're like, it's called PIM, right? Like, because we've been trying to get them to understand what it is, but in the end, call me whatever you want. Let's take the demand and the use case of what you need and apply the product. And I do think, all joking aside, the better we are at communicating it, and maybe even calling it PM. I don't know, like, because that makes more sense than PIM to some people, right? It has a name. You can even do a cute little logo around it, whatever, and it'll be memorable to people. Maybe we'll call it Pam. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
And now at that point, people start to adopt it and it gets applied, and then companies start to differentiate themselves based off the feature sets or verticals that they go to, because there's a depth of need that is there. I actually think we can start to charge even more because of the value that we're delivering to the businesses than we currently do right now. There's just a lot that waterfalls after that, but now is the time. Like, I mean, there's no better time than right now, and going after it organized and frankly collectively better. I think this is for those that break off to go after that market, and those that come in to join us that have broken off. The water's warm. It's a much bigger pool, and there's a lot to be had. That I think is why I'm very comfortable saying this is a 70 to $100 billion industry, more than a 10 billion.
Yeah. Yeah. Good. Final set of questions I have for you relate to, as we're seeing this shift towards software and more enterprise software, etc. I want to sort of ask a question, one related to how that impacts the physical security industry itself, with a focus on the customer organizations, the large enterprises. And that first question relates to, if you would, as when physical access control was all about the hardware, the people that you would hire to manage physical security had a certain profile, people with a certain background, certain skill set, etc. As this is becoming more and more shifting gradually towards enterprise software, you would expect the profile of people in charge of physical security will also change. Is that something you're seeing in the market today?
Yeah, absolutely. And also, I just want to remind, like, if people hear what I'm saying, they challenge it, put it in the comments. Like, well, I'm happy to engage, and I love the conversation. This is, my point of views, but they get shaped by engagement and the rest of it. So by all means, join the conversation. Yeah. So to your question, yes. I like to use a sports analogy, so go with me on this. This is how I think about it. For many years in the NBA, the National Basketball Association, right? The entire league was made up of 5'5" guards, primarily. They ran around. There was no shot clock. There was no 3-point line, but a lot of passing, good dribbling, sort of layups to the basket. Over time, the sport changed, the rules changed, the expectations of how it worked, human beings changed. Like there's a lot that went on to why it morphed. But at some point, the makeup was actually better not to have just 5'5" guards. You were
Yeah.
also better to have 7-foot centers. Now, the league didn't say, "Hey, you 5'5" guards, here's some training, here's some incentives, and my expectation of you is to now be 7-foot centers." And they're like, "Yeah, it's called genetics, and it's not going to happen." Right? So it didn't mean we threw away all the 5'5" guards. They're still there in the league. They still have a role. But we also got some 7-foot centers, some 6'6" swing forwards. Like we went out and built a team that put us in a position to be it. We didn't just complain about the 5'5" guards and shamed them because they weren't 7-foot centers. We went out and built what is needed in order to serve the market. There is a place for a team of 5'5" guards. That marketplace, again, is good. This is not a bad one being bad. It'd be bad if we just had 7-foot centers. That's called let's call that the IT industry. If we only went and did that, they don't understand physical security. Like there's a whole lot. But if we went and got some 5'5" centers, morphed them and put them together with some 7-foot, I think we would have the what's needed. Now, I do think some 5'5" centers, 5'5" guards could become 7-foot centers, unlike the real life of NBA humans. I do think you can with training. I think you can add some things on. I think you can do some things, but you have to be purposeful for it, and you have to make the change. And the good news is there are plenty that are. There's not enough. I do think as time goes on, you'll see IT companies buy security companies buy IT companies. I think companies like yourself, service providers, I won't call you manufacturers because you're a software service provider. That's also a nomenclature that needs to change. We call you all manufacturers, and sure, you make software, but it's different. Your manufacturer brings that you have some hardware that you're building, and if you build hardware, Bart, let me know. I think that would be news to me. But we need to we just need to evolve, frankly, and the service providers need to take a look at their programs, take a look at where they're showing up at shows and who they're embracing, what's on their website, who are you incentivizing, how your certifications change. Like, I don't know, maybe since we've always done certifications with like access control companies, with video companies, maybe now access control should be doing with service providers. Like, I don't know, I'll pick on Salesforce, like whatever, like a reimagination of what we need for tomorrow versus just iterating off of yesterday. That's why one of the things I talk about is the past 30 years, those 1970s they talked about, has little to nothing to do with the next 30 of what's going to go on here. Now, it's our opportunity to command the space that we occupy because, again, safety and security matter, but the truths of the old do not determine the truths of the new, and we should rethink and do both, frankly. We should be fostering the today business of the high security while also growing the tomorrow excuse me, and today business of the enterprise software world that is security as well.
Yeah. Oh, great answer. Last question, Lee. As we are moving to like more emphasis on software, and I think as you just said, it's going to be a balance thing. It's not that it's suddenly going to
Correct.
shift from one way to the other. But as we are seeing that shift, do you expect the marketplace as such to change? And what I mean by that, do you expect players that currently are in the IT market and the cybersecurity market, whatever, in other spaces to either enter this space or the other way around, this market to become a submarket of another larger one? And if
Yeah.
so, what is your prediction? Is that going to be a 5-year thing, a 10-year thing, a 30-year thing?
Yeah, these are always my favorite. Like, so I call my trends presentation inevitable trends, and then I like to argue the impact and timing, frankly, because I
Yeah.
feel like they're inevitably happening. I mean, it's we probably need another hour, but my answer would be yes, because if take away specific to access control and security, digital transformation, show me an industry that didn't have massive change when digital transformation, whether you want to take Andreessen Horowitz's software eating the world, it all of that is happening to us now. So although we've been for 30 years been allowed to say we're different in this like special unicorn of safety security. I hate to break it to everybody. We're no different than the pay. We're no different than you name it industry, the video, audio, entertainment business. Like, all of them have
Yeah.
seen disruption and change. So I do think you start to see it. I'll give you some core examples. On Monday, we had a conference we did called ACMA. We brought investment banking, we brought venture capitalists, we brought PE firms, industry, and that together. The amount of people that were in that room that didn't come from our industry, that are traditional investors in other industries, like name all of the other ones that have been disrupted by software, the majority that were there were not from our industry.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have a feeling if I would have done that show 2 years ago, none of them would have showed up. So reason why I think it's important is a lot of the acceleration that happens in our industry that we don't like to talk about. We like to talk about technology, but follow the money. And whether people like it or not, the capital markets dictate a lot of what happens in industries. And it is going to reshape either because the expectations of the larger companies in our space, the historical ones like Assa Abloy, Allegion, Dormakaba, name the public company. These public companies, the street is going to have an expectations of what their books look like and the expectations of what it is. And as that goes on, so will the transformation of those businesses. That stuff trickles down. On the private side, influx of money from the capital markets, the return expectation they have, they're all showing up not because we make better hardware. Like I can promise you, they're all showing up because of software. And because as money comes into the marketplace, we will see investments heavily, whether it's the go-to-market strategies, the way we build, the partnerships, the exposure that they have to it's just all of that shifting. The markets are going to change. Then take the customer's expectation, how these systems work. I'll treat it as I think in 2020 when COVID happened, the biggest impact that happened to our industry has nothing to do technologically wise. There is a shift in the trust and comfort of the expectations of how our systems work from the person procuring it. And frankly, maybe their bosses too. Things
Yeah.
like, hey, I can't leave my house to go check on my building. How's it doing? And they're like, I don't know. And they're like, how do you not know? Like, well, I can't leave and I have no visibility to my assets. Okay. I think now all of a sudden they don't seem to mind putting budget towards cloud. So the expectation, take mobile. The expectation is, the CEO is going to be like, hey, so I can get in my house with this. I can pay for this. I can do everything. I want to get in my building with this. And all of a sudden, everyone's going to run around and they're going to figure out that, oh, we can do that. The customer's demand is going to change that. So like all of that is shifting to where I also think the people are going to start to see the impacts they have on themselves when they can build something and somebody wants to buy it, and the multipliers that we're talking about in the new versus the old,
Yeah.
it's going to change people's tastes of what they would like to spend their time doing. While at the same time, the old truths are going to exist for quite a while. So if you ask my timing, it's well underway now. I've been on record of saying 3 to 5 years. I'm bullish. I mean, feel like that's the job I'm supposed to be in. It will take probably a little bit longer, but I mean, I'm waiting for the day we wake up and we're like, we're talking about the past and the past, not like the past is the today. Like that's how we talk about the past. Like it's the same thing today. So we're not far off in my opinion because large enterprises are doing it globally. Large money is coming into the marketplace. More of these conversations are happening every day. Products are being, created. You talked about Mercury. Mercury just introduced an app to their boards. Like that's like, there's people rolling in their graves of yesterday's Mercury for that happening. Like so fundamental shifts are refactoring our industry. While at the same time, 5% growth on legacy on-site systems will exist for some time too.
Super. Great response, Lee, and we'll revisit it in 3 to 5 years to see whether we made that
Yeah.
shift.
Yeah, well,
Uh,
let's put it in our calendars now. But yeah, that
yeah,
would be good.
indeed.
Yeah.
That will we'll check whether it happened. I would like to thank you very much, Lee. Great insights, great conversation. Thanks for being on with us today, and I hope to be able to have a similar conversation with you in the near future.
Absolutely. No, I appreciate the opportunity. Always do. We need to have more of these conversations. So kudos to you all for leading them and doing what you do. So thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah. Thanks, Lee.
Thank you.